I'd like to welcome you all this morning. It sounds like you had quite a great presentation by Senator Warner. So I'm glad that was a great presentation, and I want to welcome you here to this discussion on healthy and inclusive neighborhood development. I know this is also a topic that's really important to local leaders all around the country. Today we have a great set of speakers, both county elected officials and practitioners who work to build strong and healthy communities. So during our time together, we're going to focus both on understanding the federal guidance on the topic and county activities that work to create the kind of neighborhoods and infrastructure that give all of your residents the chance to reach their full potential. My name's Amy Kenyon. I'm a program officer at the Ford Foundation in the Equitable Development Program. As a program officer, I make grants to community-based organizations and researchers who work to understand how we create more inclusive, equitable, and healthy communities through the development process. I also occasionally get to come to conferences like this one and get lost in conference hotels and spend time with folks like you. So I appreciate the invitation to be here. I'd like to start off by giving you a definition of equitable development that I adapted from the Center for Social Inclusion and PolicyLink. To us, equitable development means using the development process to create communities where the ingredients of a good life, such as affordable housing, quality education, living wage jobs, healthy environments, and transportation that connects it all together, are equitably experienced by the people currently living and working in a community, as well as for the new people moving in. Public and private investments, programs, and policies in neighborhoods meet the needs of all residents, including the most vulnerable populations, and reduce racial disparities, taking into account past history and current conditions. So as much as I believe that equity and inclusion, fighting poverty and injustice in our communities is what we're called to do as human beings, it's important to know that these are not simply moral imperatives. As a county leader, these issues matter to you because it has an economic impact. Creating pathways for all residents to participate in a region's social fabric and work life actually pays economic dividends. And local governments especially play an essential role in making that possible. So in research that we've supported at the Ford Foundation, economists from institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development have found that high levels of inequality take an economic toll by lowering economic growth. Researchers Manuel Pastor from University of Southern California and Chris Benner from University of California, Davis have demonstrated through their research on regions that greater income equality is the strongest predictor of whether a region will sustain its growth over time. I just came from Denver last week, where I heard Harvard scholar Matthew Desmond speak about affordable housing and housing insecurity in this country based on his work in Milwaukee. Have folks here read his book, Evicted? Nobody? Oh, good, okay. It's actually a much easier and more interesting read than the previous research that I cited, and I hope you'll all add it to your reading list. Matthew made the point that we are unique as a nation in that we are both the world's richest democracy with the highest levels of poverty. His work explores the way that our housing policies and our lack of protections for low-income renters are in fact exacerbating and perpetuating poverty, rather than giving people the building blocks that we all need to achieve our potential. And as we know from some of the research that I just mentioned, this actually has a negative impact on all of us. So 3 things I want you to keep in mind as we launch into this panel. First, county leaders care about creating opportunity for everyone, not just because you're nice people, which I'm sure you are, but because inequality is bad for business and it slows economic growth. Second, the choices that we've made as a country at both the federal and local levels have created the high levels of inequality and economic separation that we face in our regions today. But 3, the good news is we can tackle this, and your counties have an important role to play. So this is what we've come together today to talk about, to share lessons from experience. You are looking at a group of people at this table who fundamentally believe that we can create stronger neighborhoods and healthier economies, and have experience in how counties make that possible. We hope this will be informative and practical discussion about inclusive communities, from the historical mandates laid out in the Federal Fair Housing Act to the local actions that you as elected representatives can lead in your counties. I'm going to quickly introduce this wonderful panel, but because the five of us want to spend the bulk of our time together in interactive discussion with all of you, I'll be very brief. It's worth knowing that there's much more about each of these great people in your online meeting materials, which I hope you'll refer to. First, we have Krista Mills, the new Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Office of Policy, Legislative Initiatives, and Outreach at the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD. Next to Krista is Ron Sims, the former Deputy Secretary for HUD, the former executive for King County, and many of you may know him as one of the founders of the NACo Large Urban County Caucus. Stephen Norman is the Executive Director for the King County Housing Authority and the President of the National Council of Large Public Housing Authorities. And Martha Schrader is a Commissioner for Clackamas County, Oregon. Among her many priorities is the promotion of county and regional economic development. I want to thank all of you for being here. I'm really excited to moderate this panel. I have a question for each of our speakers on our topic today. And once we run through each question and they make a brief presentation, we will open up to the floor and spend the bulk of our time talking through these important topics as a group. So Krista, I'm going to start with you. We know that HUD provides funding to counties to promote strong communities, but what can you tell us about HUD's new emphasis on partnering with local governments to really move the needle on strong neighborhoods? We'll switch it around.
Do I need to have this on, or this is? Okay, great, thank you. Thank you, Amy, and hello, everyone. Glad to see a big crowd throughout the entire building, especially in this room. So thank you for joining us all this morning. Let me just speak from HUD's perspective and where we are and our support of you as elected officials and leaders in your counties throughout the nation. HUD is working to be a partner with local governments in grappling with the challenging work of supporting healthy and inclusive communities and neighborhoods that serve as a springboard for everyone's success. We do this through many avenues, as you well know, including the provision of funds to help deal with homelessness, ADA improvements, home repair for poor families, water main projects, and anti-housing discrimination resources, as well as many other ways in which we aid communities. We work with and through you because you as local elected leaders know your communities best. The Fair Housing Act of 1968 is the basis of the modern view of neighborhood and community, namely that no person is denied the ability to live in the community of their choice based on race, disability, national origin, and other protected characteristics under the Fair Housing Act. By accepting federal community development funds, your jurisdiction agrees to develop strategies, sometimes called affirmatively furthering fair housing, that ensure the spirit of the Fair Housing Act is met and realized in your county. There's no one cookie cutter method that can be provided by Washington because real solutions can only be developed locally. No doubt this is complicated work. If ending issues like exclusion and poverty were simple, they would have been eradicated a long time ago. That is why we at HUD have developed data tools as well as technical assistance to help you and your housing staff identify community challenges and design strategies to cope with your unique circumstances. Eventually, every jurisdiction receiving HUD funds in the country will develop an assessment of fair housing, and that is to aid you in your community planning processes and support the kind of inclusive communities that Amy referenced in her opening remarks. And soon, we'll hear from Clackamas County, who has joined us, and they were one of the very first submitters of an assessment of fair housing in the country back in October of 2016. So thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity, Amy.
Thank you, Krista.
I knew this just wasn't going to work.
2 microphones is hard to juggle. We're going to turn it over to Ron next. Ron, you've worked on community development issues from both the federal and the county levels, so you have a really unique perspective for us today. What advice do you have for elected officials in this room as it relates to the hard work of creating strong and inclusive communities? It's up to you.
Well, it's great to be here at NACo. I was at many a conference, and I enjoyed them. I used to steal people's ideas and come back and tell people they were mine. But we did some interesting things. I want to kind of put in context how we were looking at communities. And I'd like to tell you that it was planned, but it really wasn't. I became county executive, and I'll put this in context. There was New York Times did a story once, and there was Norm Rice and Gary Locke and myself were on the front page. And it was the first time in U.S. history that the top 3 executive offices that were elected of any state were handled by people of color. The common thing we all had is that I was president of a group called Southeast Effective Development, Norm Rice was a vice president of SEED, and Gary Locke was a vice president of SEED. Our issue was that we were activists in Southeast Seattle, a place needing a lot of attention and a lot of love. There wasn't any single issue that drove Southeast issues. We needed transportation systems, we needed bus service, we needed stoplights, we needed stop signs, we had schools with no playgrounds, we needed bulkheads, and so the issue was to see the whole of a community in regards to neighborhoods. When I became the county executive, I had no idea of the opportunities that were presented that were exciting. I mean, really exciting to go out and tour the entire county, which I did, and then to look at all the places that I thought, you know, I could seed this. And literally what I mean is that you could bring an integrated approach to altering people's lives. You could not talk about building housing without talking about transportation systems. You couldn't talk about transportation systems without sidewalks. You couldn't talk about it without having good lighting. You couldn't talk about it without having good vegetation. Where were the commercial activities? It was looking at the whole of it. I had no authority over most of it. I could alter a land use. I could provide the transportation system. But I remember one time in a place called North Highline, which was the largest urban poor district, and they had no schools. And they had 2 schools that were closed because of infestation. So I remember going to the superintendent saying, have you ever thought about building schools in this area? He said, we have a bond levy, we could add them. I said, but the levies always fail. I said, by what percentage? So he gave me the percentage. So as the county executive, I went in and funded a group in North Highline whose sole job was to increase turnout so that we could pass the school levy, and telling them if they had the school levy and they voted, they would for once again have schools. So he put in the levy, 2 schools, and the levy passed. I had no jurisdiction at all over the decisions of the school district, but we could influence voters. And that's what I think that I learned as executive, is how to put the pieces together that I couldn't control. I couldn't control the private sector, but I could get them interested. I had no authority over housing authorities, but yet we found them to be great partners once we committed to restore neighborhoods. And if I can give any lesson, it is the ability to put together a network of people who want to do it. I had no authority in any single city. But I could go to a city and say, you know, you're not providing low-income housing. I find that interesting. And one city in particular was a very wealthy city, and the hoteliers there were saying that they can't hire people anymore because people have to go a great distance to get to work. It's expensive to park there. So I said, well, why don't you just work out having people live nearby? And so all of a sudden, the business community found it in its interests to say, hold a second, our people who clean, who work, who serve, who cook, don't live in that community. And as a result, they were more than willing to actually engage in rebuilding and providing new neighborhoods to restore and new housing facilities for people to live in. I loved being an elected official. When I went back to HUD, somebody was talking to me about affirmatively furthering fair housing. I had no idea what that meant. I had none. So they were giving me this briefing. But in the terms of a local official, what I thought about, it wasn't affirmatively furthering fair housing, we were into economic growth, redevelopment of neighborhoods, everywhere, providing new housing opportunities, stimulating business, having a lot of new partners. And I think when you talk about affirmatively furthering fair housing, it's not some rule that one has to live by. If you, in fact, believe that every community can flourish, simply, every community can flourish. Every community should have sidewalks. Every community should be well lit. Every community probably wants a community garden. Every community, especially if you're seniors, want gathering points where you can think you can sit and stay there safely. Small businesses want people who can walk the street and walk to their businesses. So what I simply did is I asked my staff, and they did, and I followed their lead, and they were wonderfully crazy, and I was wonderfully crazy enough to follow them, which is that there was nothing going to be, we didn't have rules other than the fact that a community had to be the winner, that the people in it had to be the winner, and that we wanted communities to be altered. When the city said to me, you have no jurisdiction in our cities, I said, oh, you're correct, I have none. But I have a bully pulpit, and you don't want, as we used to say, you don't want to talk ugly about them. So cities, rather than have the county executive say, I have 30 cities that are on board with my vision, then I have 6 cities that don't care about poor people, don't care about industrial, manufacturing, don't care about retail growth, don't care about the economics of the cities. They just want to die. Rather than have me say that, which I threatened to do, they all of a sudden got on board as well. But we needed the whole. We needed the whole. We didn't tell anybody what to do. We never told anybody what to do. We simply empowered the people in those communities to have a voice. We brought resources, and we aligned other resources with them. It wasn't just public housing that we had. We persuaded the commercial housing builders to build low-income housing. We had large developments that people wanted to build. We were exploding in regards to the population, and we said, you know what we would like to have? We would like to have emergency housing in that development. We would like to have low-income housing in that development. And people would say, well, how could you talk to a developer and have them agree to do that? Because the developers made more money with the housing that we were allowing. And our only quid pro quo for that was to say, here are populations that we wanted you to serve as well. They did really well, and those communities are now very, very diverse. So if I were a county official today, I'd go, wow, affirmative furthering is fine. This isn't an affirmative furthering for a housing issue. That is a law. What really is the task is how do you stimulate and redevelop an entire community so that every neighborhood wins, every city wins, every community wins, every group wins. And there is nothing more satisfying for a local official than to be a part or the catalyst or the fuse that's lit or the drum beat. I don't care whether you're at the back of the parade or the front of the parade, as long as you are part of the parade. Some people need to be urged. Sometimes you got to run up and catch up with somebody. Oh, wow, life is not meant to be dull. It is meant to be exciting and vibrant. And that's what your task is. And communities win when you decide that you can believe in their dreams, when you can believe in the whole, when you can believe in an integrated community, when you can believe in employment and transportation and good health care and good schools. Thank you.
So Stephen, not only do you have the task of going after fraud, I'm hoping you can talk about an elephant in the room when it comes to fair housing. A lot of people talk about a tension between housing mobility on the one hand and investing in existing poor neighborhoods. So how does this play out under fair housing, and what's your perspective on this?
Well, I actually get to follow Ron a lot, and the great thing is nobody ever remembers what I said, so the pressure is off. Let me talk briefly about 3 things. One is, what's the role of public housing authorities in countywide discussions on these issues? Second, why neighborhood matters, why community matters, and third, what are some of the local approaches that we've taken in King County that have, we think, moved the needle on some of these issues. First, housing authorities. Housing authorities are in transformation. I think it's fair to say that in many areas of the country, particularly the large urban housing authorities and now increasingly the suburban authorities, are getting out from under the issue of deferred maintenance and inadequate federal funding. There is a variety of recapitalization tools that are out there: Choice Neighborhoods, Hope 6, the RAD program, low-income housing tax credits, and also most notably for here, something called Moving to Work, which is a name that Congress gave to a program over a decade ago, which typically has nothing to do with either moving or work. Moving to Work essentially is a deregulation program that enables housing authorities to receive their public housing Section 8 money in what is in essence a block grant with fungibility, and enables them to waive out of many of the HUD rules and to design programs that more effectively address local conditions and local priorities. I think it's fair to say that the expansion of this deregulation agenda was not a priority under the Obama administration. In the last Congress, however, the Senate put in and was subsequently approved a 100-agency expansion of the program. Currently, there are only 39 out of 3,000 housing authorities in the country that are moving to work. We, King County, are one. Seattle is another. And I can tell you honestly, makes all the difference in the world in terms of having the tools to effectively partner and work on these issues on a regional level. So I think if there's one big takeaway from what I'm telling you, it's go back, talk to your housing authorities about applying to get into moving to work. I suspect that this administration, this Congress, will blow the cap off of the new 100-unit cap on new agencies. The closer we can get to this level of flexibility at the local level, the better housing authorities become as a tool for what you're trying to do. So neighborhoods matter. And we all say, yeah, that's kind of self-evident. But the dirty little secret is that for years, the field research was inconclusive. Basically, we weren't seeing in the longitudinal studies the kind of significant impacts that being in better neighborhoods was having on poor children. And I will stop here for a moment and say I'm focusing on poor children because arguably from the housing authority's perspective, we house 20,000 children. The most important thing we can do as a housing authority is to impact the life outcomes for those children. It matters to the children, it matters to the community, and it matters to the region because this is the next generation workforce. This is the economic future of your region. How do we help the schools in terms of academic success, life outcomes for these kids, because the schools cannot do it on their own. Well, the dam has broken. There are a series of studies that have come out in the last 2 years that have essentially the jury's back in that neighborhood quality matters. What you see here is from a study that was done for the Century Foundation that shows that if you get poor kids into low poverty schools and you keep them there for a significant period of time, as you can see, the scores go way, way up. And this really serves as a proxy for what happens in the rest of their education. This particular slide looks at gains in reading and this particular one, math. But there is extensive data now that shows that these outcomes are being seen across the board. Last year, Raj Chetty and a team from Harvard and MIT got their hands on some metadata sets from the IRS, which has not been so easy since the Nixon period, but essentially showed what is happening over time for children who are being moved into from high to low poverty neighborhoods. We're seeing significant increases in the likelihood of going to college, much less likely to be a single parent, and significant increases in lifetime earnings, which also translates into local taxes. So I would argue that these kind of impacts on kids are essential to the long-term health and future of the region, as well as to the individual kids themselves. So where does that leave us in terms of strategies? Well, this is just very quickly the Seattle, King County, Ron Sims County. You've got Seattle in the middle, You've got an array of 39 suburban cities around it, and essentially we've got 2,300 square miles and a population of about 2.1 million. 700,000 live essentially in Seattle. The bulk of the population lives in within the urban growth boundary that essentially uses Seattle as their center. The county also goes out to about here, to the peaks of the Cascade Mountains. So you can slice and dice this a lot of ways. The way I chose on this slide is to look at free and reduced meal or farm rates as one of the proxies for poverty, racial segregation, social determinants of health, a whole array of other things. And as you can see, the poverty rates in the school districts down in Highline, which Ron was just talking about, at 65%, Tukwila at 75%, literally a mile and a half away in Mercer Island is 3%. This is essentially the county's Silicon Valley, centered around a small high-tech startup in Redmond called Microsoft. And what we are seeing over time is increasing costs in Seattle, increasing housing costs on the east side, and growing concentration of poverty down south. And this has ramifications not only in terms of neighborhood quality, but also in terms of other issues for the region, such as transportation. Microsoft is out here, and I drive through that campus. It's a magnificent driver for the economic growth of the region and prosperity. But all I can see is the unbelievable number of windows that have to be washed, hedges that have to be trimmed, meals that are served in the cafeteria. And the reality is that the people who do all that can't live anywhere on the east side. Increasingly, they're pushed further and further, either south into Pierce County, north into Snohomish County, and the cost of getting them to the jobs and back at night is putting increasing strain on transportation systems. We simply cannot enlarge the roads enough to handle this disconnect between where people work and where people live. As economists like to say to me, homes are where jobs go at night, and low-wage jobs need affordable homes, and increasingly they're nowhere near the actual workplace. So this ties into what Ron also likes to call smart growth, which is looking at what are the ramifications of where people live, where people work, on the overall infrastructure of the region. So we essentially divide the area into three sets of communities, three sets of markets, and I preface this by saying every region is different. Every region has different markets and needs different solutions, and I think one of the challenges for HUD is to create a national framework for looking at these issues that is not overly directive and gives the flexibility to localities to design solutions that reflect their market and their priorities. So this is an ongoing discussion that I expect will play out over the next couple of years with HUD. Essentially, we see markets in three ways. We see the high-income, high-opportunity markets, and we map this out with the Puget Sound Regional Council, which is the region's planning body. We see areas that are currently poor, not necessarily high opportunity, but by dint of market pressures, will be turning more middle class, gentrifying, becoming more opportunity areas without government doing anything. And then third, we see low-income neighborhoods where, if anything, we're seeing increasing concentrations of poverty because people are being pushed out of other areas. Solutions are different in each of these places. Just briefly, we have an array of tools that we're using to move people into high and very high opportunity neighborhoods. Of the 20,000 units we have a goal that 30% of the families with children will live in high or very high opportunity neighborhoods. We're currently up to 26% through both tenant-based Section 8, where we have small market rents that reflect the differing rent levels in different neighborhoods. Again, this is something you do under moving to work. We've also acquired a considerable amount of housing in these neighborhoods. We prefer to do acquisition rather than new construction because it is significantly less expensive. It's less shiny, but it's also more doable. One of the key issues here is a partnership between the Housing Authority and the county. Where the county lends the Housing Authority its AAA bond rating, which enables us to go out, get line of credit that enables us to get in and buy properties competitively on the open market. So we have both place-based and mobility strategies in high opportunity areas. In areas that we think are gentrifying, the key is to go in and lock up affordability in as much of the stock as you can, because the rest of the stock will inevitably become higher income. Just last August, we purchased a 78-unit complex that was actually in Bellevue, what was about to be torn down and turned into high-end townhomes, about $1 million apiece. The state, the county, and the city quickly stepped up with the housing authority, and we were able to essentially back the developer off. The demolition signs were already up, and save it. 78 units, primarily Latino. There was no place in the community for these folks to go if that housing was closed. So this notion of preservation of existing affordable housing in areas where market is going to push it out is a critical part of the puzzle, and it probably is more cost efficient than a lot of new construction after the housing has been taken down. And then finally, in areas like Highline, where we have very significant targeted populations of poor folks, we have an array of revitalization tools. One of the things that Raj Chetty and his team is currently working on, and there's a consortium of housing authorities across the country, is to figure out what is the magic sauce in what they call high opportunity neighborhoods that gives us the results we saw on those prior slides, and how does that sauce, that secret sauce, get imported back into poor neighborhoods? Because at the end of the day, and this roundabout way of getting to your question, at the end of the day, regardless of how successful mobility is, expanding geographic choice, the reality is that the majority of poor people will still be living in neighborhoods that are comprised primarily of poor people. And the answer to your question is neighborhood matters. We need to double down on mobility and geographic choice. We also need to double down on investing in the existing poor neighborhoods. Again, I think HUD needs to be more flexible in looking at how they judge investments into poor neighborhoods. I think if you read the fine print in the SCOTUS decision on disparate impact, if you read even the fine print in the Fair Housing Rule, there's a recognition that you need to do both, that you need to address conditions in poor neighborhoods. You can't write those neighborhoods off, in effect, redline them from a government perspective under the guise of fair housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. So, Commissioner Schrader, I'm so glad you're here with us today because, as Krista mentioned, you represent one of the lucky jurisdictions that was the first to undertake HUD's new assessment of fair housing process. So can you tell us a little bit more today about your region and your experience over the past year?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Martha Schrader, Clackamas County Commissioner, and I'm going to start by saying, as an elected official, you are only as successful and as good as the people you work with. So sitting in the front row is Chuck Robbins, who is the head of our housing authority, and I've worked with Chuck since 2003 on this issue. I've been doing this for quite a while, but he is truly the expert and has allowed me to be the talking head, I think, of all the hard work that his department did in order to satisfy the new HUD requirements. And indeed, we got 2 thumbs up from HUD. They did an excellent job, and as one of the first jurisdictions out of the chute to comply with the new rules and regulations, I think it was remarkable that it was because of the experience of our staff, and I like to think, Chuck, as a support of the commissioners, it enabled us to do this. But first, let me give you some context of the county that I live in. We're actually one of 4 counties that makes up the Portland, Oregon metropolitan area, and we are the 3rd most populous county with more than 400,000 people. That includes Multnomah County, Clackamas County, Washington County, and across the river to the north, Clark County. So if that gives you a sense of our geographic regional picture of where we sit. And like the rest of the region, and particularly the Portland area, we are experiencing very high growth. Since 2010, our population in our county alone has increased by 7%, which is about 3% higher than the national average. So you see, we're also a county and a state, actually, where there has been and will continue to be significant in-migration from other states. We have 16 different cities, if you can imagine that. Our largest city is Lake Oswego of 39,000. Our smallest is the city of Barlow of 139 folks. So if you can think about the size of our county in 16 cities, we have to build relationships with those cities, some of whom actually believe that there is not a housing crisis. So we do have some work to do with them. We have very distinct urban and rural areas. And addressing this divide, particularly with 16 cities, is part of the challenge of being a county commissioner, because we really want to make sure that all residents in the unincorporated as well as the incorporated cities are heard and that they are represented with us. This urban-rural divide also presents us with significant budgetary challenges. For example, we have the most paved roads of any county in Oregon, rural roads, nearly 1,400 miles. And under state law, we can't use property taxes to pay for road maintenance. A large percentage of our land is comprised of forests managed by the federal and state government. And our county seat is Oregon City, the end of the Oregon Trail, and which was, as you know, historically a major trading post and the first city incorporated west of the Mississippi. Our county seat is located at the confluence of two major rivers, the Willamette and the Clackamas, and we are also home to Willamette Falls, the second largest waterfall by volume on the continent. So you think Niagara first. Secondly, you think of Willamette Falls, if you can believe that. And the reason I give you this context is because of our geographic diversity, because of the fact that we have 16 cities, small, smaller, medium, large, and then large, that in order to pull together the people from that landscape in order to do this process was pretty significant. And as I said, I'm very proud of the fact that as one of the first counties out of the chute that we did get the 2 thumbs up from HUD. A little bit that is unique about us, our county commissions, we're both the governing body for the county, and by state statute, we also serve as the Public Health Authority, and we are also the Housing Authority Board for Clackamas County. So some of the issues that we've dealt with recently that negatively affect housing in Clackamas County, we have an uneven understanding of fair housing laws by landlords and tenants. And this was some of the things we found out as we were doing our outreach in order to meet the HUD criteria. The geographic concentration, and this is pretty serious, this is one of the things that personally worries me as an elected official the most. The geographical concentration of public housing, nearly 75% of all of our public housing is located in 2 cities. 16 cities, only 2 really have stepped up to the plate to have affordable housing as part of their land use planning, as part of their value set that they want to help house people, and as part of the folks in more of the urban area that actually has the transportation structure to move people in and out. The other piece of this is, I just mentioned, the lack of public infrastructure to solicit development of affordable housing and limited local funds to support the development. So we really have a number of hurdles that we have to work as a county in order to overcome to make sure that we are doing what we can for the folks that deserve and need this housing. Let me give you some highlights of the AFFH process. HUD's data tool was excellent to use. Thank you very much for that. And I would encourage every single one of you as an elected official with your housing authority folks to look into its capabilities. HUD's local office also made themselves available to our housing authority staff for assistance in questions. So I would say that HUD was very helpful as we were kind of the guinea pigs for this first foray into meeting these sets of criteria. So what did we actually do? What was the process that we used? Well, first of all, as you know, I think you're all aware, you always have to involve your stakeholders. So what we did, and what Chuck did with his team, was essentially conduct 10 public presentations to various stakeholder groups where we asked for time on their regularly scheduled meeting agendas. We did 3 county-wide surveys, actually 3 different surveys, one to the general population that was county-wide, one to public housing residents, and one to Spanish speakers. We contacted 24 agencies. We solicited their feedback on housing needs and their feedback on the AFH. These agencies range from resource and senior centers to nonprofits to the State Department of Human Services office. We formed a work group comprised of the Clackamas County Community Development folks. They facilitated the discussions. The Housing Authority of Clackamas County Social Service Division. We employed data analyst experts, housing analyst experts. We worked with the Fair Housing Council of Oregon and the Legal Aid Services. And the information and the feedback from this set of outreach was really, I think, the linchpin of pulling us together with 6 strategic goals. Goal number 1 is develop new housing units with long-term affordability for a broad range of low-income households with an emphasis on dispersal of affordable housing. That's going to be a heavy bucket of water to carry up the hill if we have 16 cities and just 2 cities that so far have taken the bulk of our affordable housing. So that's going to be a goal. A personal goal of mine is to make sure that the rest of those cities begin to understand this is not just 2 cities that need to take up this mantle. All of us have to work together to take up the mantle of affordable housing. We wanted to increase accessibility to affordable housing for persons with disabilities and single-parent familial status households with children under 18 years. We wanted to improve access to housing and services for all protected classes. And we wanted to enforce fair housing laws and increase public understanding of fair housing laws. The last 2, we wanted to coordinate fair housing advocacy and enforcement efforts among regional partners and ensure that all housing in Clackamas County is healthy and habitable. So that's kind of a general overview, but I would just like to tell you a couple of things that, above and beyond this, that we are doing, because we are facing a housing crisis not only in Clackamas County, but the region. It is pretty significant. We in our area, for example, not only grapple with the fact that we have homeless folks out in our rural areas living in the woods and tent encampments, we also have urban areas such as what we call the Springwater Corridor, which is a long corridor of a walking path that really connects our rural area to our urban area. And we have dealt with significant issues with encampments along that corridor. And so when our folks went out, when our Department of Human Services folks went out to actually interview these people, we found out that most of those folks were homeless because of a crisis that happened in their life, and they came from the community along the corridor. These were not outside folks who were kind of moving in, transient and otherwise. These were people who had lived in those communities for a good portion of their life, and because of medical issues, because of bankruptcy issues, job loss, actually became homeless. And that was a significant piece of data that we felt that we needed to know to start working on not just the continuum of affordable housing, but that notion of what do we do with people who need emergency shelter, need transitional housing, and need to move quickly into something so we can help them get back on their feet. So that was an interesting piece. The second thing that we're doing that I think for me was quite remarkable is instead of internally having this just simply be a problem or an issue that we're working with human services, We pulled together a coalition from our planning department. We pulled, and that includes transportation, land use planning. We pulled together a coalition with our development services folks who are charged with the disposition of property and locating properties within our county, and we pulled them together with human services. And we had a broad level, high level discussion of what housing meant. And one of the remarkable things for me as an elected official was I realized that our human services folks had different definitions from our business folks who pretty much dealt with just the transaction of selling property and buying property. Remarkable, because then at this meeting they started to talk to the same language and understand what the definitions of poverty were. It was actually really, really eye-opening. And having our planning department there and having the folks that work on our code enforcement as we move forward with looking at new innovations such as, the tiny housing or transitional housing, having them discuss what code changes need to happen via land use in order to locate housing in a different and new way was essential. So not only did we meet the external requirements of HUD, I am proud to say that I believe our county is also internally breaking down barriers between our departments to take a multifaceted approach to coping with this problem. Finally, let me end by just mentioning one success, and I want to thank Chuck for this as well. We did work with PedCore Corporation. We have online 212 affordable housing units that is actually going to be by what we call the Fuller Station, which is one of our transit stops, and it will provide 212 units of housing from 3-bedroom to 1-bedroom apartments, and they will be available. This is what was remarkable. Thank you so much for this, Chuck. 60 years. And I will credit our people that work in this field for making that remarkable opportunity happen. So we still have a lot to do. Thank you, HUD, for your help with getting your boots on the ground, and we will continue as one of the key metropolitan counties to work on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Schrader. We're going to turn to questions from you all in a minute and start a dialogue. So if you have a question and want a microphone, I'll kick those off in a second. I'm getting 3 takeaways from this panel, which really I think want to emphasize. Everything has to be in threes for me to make sense of it. I'm hearing locally driven solutions with the support and assistance of HUD, both in terms of the data and the resources and technical assistance, but really locally driven. Second, the importance of encouraging collaboration across stakeholders and dialogue, both across agencies and stakeholders and even across jurisdictions in order to break down barriers and find these local solutions, even when, as Ron says, it's outside of your sort of jurisdictional authority and the things you can get done by saying you have to do this. And then third, I'm really hearing a theme about the importance of community engagement and data to really first identify what the problems are and their causes in your unique context, and then use those inputs as a path to figure out solutions together. Again, the local solutions with HUD support. So thanks for that, I think, really great overview. Do we have, I have some questions I could ask, but why don't we see if we've got some questions from the audience?
I've got a couple, but I'll try to keep it short. The comment that I have before I ask the question is that as a commissioner, I've been serving I'm in my 8th year now, and I see you're talking about county commissioners or counties getting involved with helping to solve some of the dilemmas that we have in our neighborhoods or in our communities regarding housing and workforce and that sort of thing. And once, I don't know about other states or other commissioners here, it just seems like the city boundary, and the county's there. I'm a city commissioner. The city seems to take more authority over those issues, like this gentleman, Mr. Sims, was mentioning that his authority was very limited in many ways, except for you were able to get out there because you are an elected official and encourage people to get together and try to get them to cooperate. But there's there's a big chasm there. I'm telling you, it's a big chasm, and I want to know if anybody else here feels that way, that when dealing with your city as a county, they have that jurisdiction and so if it doesn't come from them, it's like if it's not their idea, it's pretty hard to get something going sometimes, and so it's a real problem, and I just want to know if anybody else feels that way.
So, can you hear me? Okay, good. Well, we are tackling that. What we're doing at this point in our county, I guess I'm not. Maybe I'll just stand up because this says it's on. It is on. Okay, it is on. So one of the things we have to do, because you're right, if we have 16 cities and only 2 really are having the bulk of this, we as a county are starting to convene the conversation with the cities. And what that means for me is the elected to the elected piece. For example, Lake Oswego is one of our wealthiest cities. It's 39,000 people. They have recently had a turnover in their city council, and one of the councilors is extremely interested in workforce and affordable housing. So there's that piece where you really do have to go out and do outreach as a county as elected officials. The other piece that is essential as well is to have your county administrator have relationships and do the outreach to the city administrators. Now, we regularly convene, as we call it, the Clackamas County Coordinating Council with the county and our cities on a monthly basis. So one of our initiatives right now is to raise the level of awareness with our cities and talk about our co-responsibility of how we're having to work with this problem. But understand that our urban city folks are dealing with different issues than our Sandys, our Estacaders, our rural communities. So the other technical and complexity of this is that the solution for housing in our urbanized larger cities is going to be quite different than our smaller rural cities who are literally seeing, for example, more issues out in the rural areas and in the woods with encampments and things of that sort. So it really is a convening opportunity for a county to build those relationships, raise the level of awareness, and then, since we have our housing authority, then we step up and offer the assistance and help to move ahead with solutions, jurisdiction by jurisdiction.
I see we have a question in the front row. I don't know when they're going to give us a hook. Oh, right over here, too. We've got 10 minutes. Okay, great. So we definitely have time.
I have a question for, I guess, Ron and Martha. How, and it's not vis-a-vis the city, it's your commission. Did your commissions buy into this work, or did they have to be convinced? I'm from Mobile, Alabama, Mobile County, Alabama, and I'm not sure, no matter how passionately I feel about us as we get involved in this effort, that our commission will necessarily agree with me that this is something that we ought to be pursuing at the level that I think. So I'm just curious about both your commissions. I don't understand the county exec. Is that like a president or, and similar question for Martha.
Now, King County is a charter county. In our state, the executive is separately elected, so I don't work for the council. The council is a separate institution. It legislates, and the executive does the administration of the government. But I have to run countywide. They run by district. I started my career as a county council member, which was by district, and then I became the county executive. It's really interesting, though, in regards to what we use to persuade people to deal with a variety of housing needs of their low-income populations and why we really wanted to see investments there. And a lot of it was that we started arguing about our ability to compete against other places in the country. We wanted our area to be a place where, we didn't want Boeing to leave. We didn't want Microsoft to leave. We wanted to be attractive as a place of, and so we had a very frank meeting by being able to attend the Chamber of Commerce's. They decided to have a retreat, and it was limited who would be there. But I was asked to attend that retreat. And their issue is, what are you going to do for us to allow us to be, to grow, to make money, to be a place that would bring new jobs and new technologies? And it was really interesting. King County was responsible for the transportation system. So I was able to talk about bus service. I was able to talk about water quality issues. But the one that drove them, as I said, everybody who has failed so far to be attractive has been places where you did not provide adequate infrastructure and housing to people who were low income. So they became an anchor. And businesses do not want to move into a place that has problems that are going to require taxation, might raise criminal justice issues. They don't want those. They want people to be able to live in good environments, no matter who their employees are. And so by getting the business community to understand that there's a quid pro quo, yes, I can help you, but you've got to help me, it resolved a lot of issues. So I never went to a city without, the business community in those areas were always telling those city officials, here's what you need to do, because it was in their interest. Now, at that time, it was just a roll of the dice. I mean, it was more rhetorical than factual, but our area has not lacked population growth and people coming in. And if you ask the business community what was resolved, one of the things that they really like about the area is that we don't have what we call hotspots, areas that all of a sudden are as in the same difficult shape as they were 20 years ago or 30 years ago. So if you were to ask me what to do, I would tell people, do you want to grow your economy, or do you just want to see it one day go somewhere else? Because the mobility issue is front and center, and we all know that, and we wanted those businesses coming to our community, but they did not want to have to come in and deal with problems that we ignored. It would be the quality of our government, whether they respected it or not, our ability to tackle. But we made them come in, so they were partners. So that wasn't like a free lunch. It was, I would do that, but hey, don't run away and say, it's all on you, Ron, because if I was going to be tackled by a community, I wanted to make sure the business community there supported us. The other was being able to get partners. The Seattle Housing Authority, King County Housing Authority was fabulous, in large part because they had a private entrepreneurial attitude. I don't know how else to describe it. They knew how to handle money. When they came to us and said, can you guarantee debt? I had no idea what that meant. I mean, they said, well, our borrowing costs will be less and we can do more. Well, why you and not everybody else? But in the end, it turned out to be one of my better decisions, and our county council concurred. And they were the only institution we ever guaranteed debt with, because we knew that they were concerned about cost and rates of return. We knew that projects would be done on time. We also knew that and they knew that we would have to buy in. So there were no free lunches. So I would also tell you that Mr. Norman was very good at extracting infrastructure concessions to us, and parks with us, and better street lighting with us, and stop signs, and better, wider sidewalks. But in the end, it made those communities much, much better and far more mixed in terms of both race and income, because it became desirable communities. So we won. But it was the business community that I needed as an ally, and mine was, there's no such thing as constant. The issue is, how do you mature and how do you make yourself attractive?
So I think they're going to try to have us make up time and end us in just a few minutes. So I want to get this last question, and then I want to give folks on the panel an opportunity to respond to this and other questions that have come up.
I'm Ricky Gray from Adams County, Mississippi. I just want to help this young man out for a minute. I used to serve as a city councilman for 16 years before I got elected to a county supervisor, and the housing authority was under the Department of the City. And by me have constituents inside and outside the city, I'm glad this conversation came up, because now I'm going to try to find a way to work with them. But I already have a relationship with the Housing Authority because I was a city councilor. But here goes my problem right here. When I was on the council, I came to Washington in 2004, and I have a detail shop. In case y'all don't know what that is, I wash cars. I make them look good. And the young lady came up to my shop with 2 little kids in the car, and she was on welfare, food stamps, or whatever you want to say. And I told her, I said, ma'am, where do you work? She said, nowhere. And they got this thing where people don't want to work, they just want to take food stamps and get help from the government. I talked her into getting a job. I said, ma'am, those 2 little boys need to see you go to work, because if they don't see their mom go to work, they not going to go to work. But here go the problem, y'all. When that young lady went and got a job, she came up to my shop 2 months later mad at me because the government cut her off of everything that she was on. Now she can't do nothing to take care of her kids because her rent went from like $30 to $500 and some dollars. So she's working at Walmart. Now she can't take care of her kids. But here go a real problem. Not the housing authority, but you got some private people coming in, buying an apartment complex. Now they say they're not dealing with HUD. Some of those people are low income people. Now their rent done went from $100 or $200 up to $500. So we got a real big problem, and I don't know how to solve it, but we got a real big problem.
I want to give each of you a minute to respond to the question, but also make any concluding remarks that you'd like from the questions and the conversation today. Krista, why don't we start with you, and we'll head on down.
I'll try not to drop the microphone this time. I'm in a better position not to do that. So I think some of the challenges that you discuss are certainly challenges across the country, because preservation of affordable housing is one of the key challenges when you talk about affirmatively furthering fair housing and having opportunity for everyone to stay in the community in which they live, or, as we've talked about as well, mobility. And that's the challenge I think that we have at HUD in terms of making that clear, in that those are local decisions to make sure that you're investing in existing communities, preserving affordable housing, and then also looking for areas of high opportunity. Some of the examples that Stephen gave in regard to the goal to have 30% of the families living in high opportunity areas so the children have better opportunities educationally and fare well throughout their lives. And if I had to say 3 things that were most important to HUD at this point is, 1, all of this stems from the Fair Housing Act. 2nd, it's locally driven. You know your communities better than anyone, and that's where the solutions are found. And the 3rd would be the balanced approach, in that you're looking at the existing communities, how can you support them, how can you reinvest in them if they've got disinvestment, and then also how can you look for the higher opportunity areas to create that environment where there are jobs near transportation that are near your home. And so I think that from our perspective is the most important. But again, just I'll emphasize one last time, this is locally driven because you know better than we do.
I don't know what the system is. I know that in our area we have people who are actually investing in housing so it becomes permanently low income, or it buys years of low income. For some people are saying, we'll buy 10 years and then be able to resell it at a higher market. I don't know what the tax implications are, but they're wealthy people, and they're not doing it out of anything other than a business sense. They might be doing a write-off of some kind. I have no idea, but that issue of preserving housing stock is becoming more and more and more significant. With the housing authorities, they can do that much more easily, why they're a great tool, a great investment in my opinion, a great community asset in my opinion. But on the private side, we're beginning to see more of that. I'm on a board with 2 people who actually do that, and I always say to them, is this out of the kindness of your heart? They said no. It is good business sense to, at least for a 10-year period, lock a place in so that it is affordable fixed price that doesn't raise your rents, because they realize that it is better to have a person housed than to have them unhoused, and because it will cost them more to see that. The schools will pay more, the healthcare system does. So their issue is more quantifiable. But I wish I knew there was a magic wand or a formula. If you had a Steve Norman in your community, he could probably figure it out, because I certainly couldn't. I need to say this in my closing. Don't tell me life is tough, because it is. And don't ever tell me something's impossible, because why live on something that is doable? I mean, anybody can do something. It's the impossible that makes life just wonderful. I wake up in the morning, I'm retired, I got grandkids, I'm getting older and I realize it, and people say, why do you wake up in the morning? And it's because the impossible is still waiting. And that's what makes life worthwhile. And every single day is a gift. I don't have it. My parents are gone. My twin brother's gone. My oldest brother is gone. I am the last of 1218 East 5th Avenue, Spokane, Washington, 99202. I wake up and I say, my God, I got one more day to do the impossible. Don't tell me it's formidable, because I don't care. So I want to tell all of you, if you think it's going to be easy, you wouldn't be elected. So do the impossible, and it requires perseverance, imagination, and teamwork. Thank you. I didn't mean to give a sermon.
Well, I will say that it's ramp that down a bit, thanks. It's a lot easier when you have Ron Sims running your county. I want to talk to just briefly two things. One is this issue of regionalization and governance that's come up in a number of the questions. And the fact is housing markets are regional, your economic base is regional, your infrastructure is regional, and you've got to have an effective collective approach. We have 39 cities, and there were days when it did resemble the Balkans. So this is something you just have to keep working on. It is ultimately in everybody's interest to work together. It floats everybody's boat. You cannot resolve housing issues in one city out of 16 or even 10 cities out of 16 and expect that regionally this is going to work. Second thought is around what is, I think, coming up in terms of funding for the federal government. And historically, housing for very low income has been a federal responsibility. There's been an increasing pullback from that. I suspect that this will be accelerated under the budgets being proposed for domestic discretionary spending in the next couple of years. And what I want to say is less is less. In King County, despite the strides we made last year, school districts reported 7,000 homeless school kids in our classrooms. And homeless school kids are not going to succeed in school. Kids who live 5 to a room in a motel are not going to get their homework done. Kids who are on a different neighbor's couch every week have other things on their mind. If the future is getting kids educated and participating in the workforce, housing is a key platform for that. And the housing community is going to need partnerships across the board, cities, counties, state, to make sure that we are not short-sheeting our regional futures by cutting these budget lines. So this is something that I would ask all of you to keep an eye on. The other piece, just to respond to one of the things that you had raised, you're not required as a landlord to take Section 8. There is, in many places, ordinances called source of income discrimination statutes, which don't say that because you have a Section 8, you have to get the unit that you've applied for. What it simply says is that your application is judged like any other person's application. It is not thrown out at the front end simply because you have a Section 8 voucher. It stops the ads that say no dogs or Section 8 voucher holders, which we see. This has not happened in many places on a statewide level. It hasn't happened in Washington State. But more and more local cities in King County are passing these ordinances because their constituents are coming to them and saying, I've lived here for 20 years and I'm being told now that I can't stay where I'm in my home because I get Section 8 assistance to pay my rent. And so these are some things that you can do locally.
Wow, I have to back clean up after all of you guys. That's scary, especially you, because I feel the same way you do. Because I have a quote on my desk that says, the possible I can do today, but the impossible is going to take me a little while. But the notion that the impossible is what keeps you going every day, and I also have grandchildren, but I'm not retired yet. But, nor will I be retired for a while, but because I love my job and I love what I do. But one of the thoughts I want to leave with you when we talk about housing, I think that housing, that it goes to the point that you said to this woman, you need to get a job, your children need to see you working. I don't think that you can uncouple workforce development with housing. I think that is a key element that we have to break down that barrier, and there's a few ways to do it. I heard about engaging the business community. The business community wants good, solid people who are skilled up, who can make a living, that they can pay them and give them a decent wage so they can afford housing. And the only gap, if I may say this, that I saw with our outreach that I think we need to make up is that we need to pull together our business community to talk about, and I'm on our workforce board, so I do that regularly, but I don't think that we have actually made a clear connection between workforce and housing. And to me, that speaks to a blue ribbon committee of our business community and our workforce board and our housing folks to start talking about what it means to employ people so they can afford, so they can be mobile and move up that ladder. So that's one of the things I will bring away from this conference, and I do think, Chuck, we need to do locally. And certainly my assistant that works with me very closely on housing, this is kind of another task that we'll be working on together. The second piece of this is that we are also looking at this workforce jobs component in housing at a regional equity level. We have an area in our region that essentially is the highest pocket of poverty in the state of Oregon. Major, it's kind of eastern Gresham, but it's in our it's kind of in our urban area. So as we work as a region, and I'm on the governor's regional solutions team, and as we redevelop, for example, a large acreage there for business development and job creation, the move now is to look at that area where there is a pocket of poverty, and what can we do specifically with the folks who are actually living there, with workforce development, with training to skill them up so they will be the people chosen to have those jobs in that redeveloped area. This is a regional initiative. It is the Portland area of our state, but I think, from my perspective, this is going to be a larger model that ties workforce with housing, with prosperity, and with our larger community. So hopefully I'll be back. Hopefully I'll get to see all of you again next year. This is great. And what I can maybe hopefully bring to the table is the success of that effort of breaking down those barriers. And dare I say, I really think HUD should be speaking very, very vigorously with the Department of Labor. Because the Department of Labor sets the kinds of workforce standards that we need to be working with in order to get federal dollars. And I don't see how you can divorce housing from workforce. And I would even say at the federal level, you need to be working across those silos to take a look at some of what those workforce pieces are and how they relate to moving people into housing. So that's my big light bulb aha as we end this discussion. So
That's great. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Let's give our panelists a round of applause.